So there you are. Everyone welcome, and I now invite David McCullough, who you see the smile on his face. He's the past president. And David will light our chalice and lead us in our affirmation of covenant, which is in your order of service.
I light this chalice with the mission statement of UUCLR. We strive to build a beloved community through shared worship, responsible spiritual freedom, exploration, and reverence. We are a welcoming congregation, embracing our interconnectedness, engaging with others by living our principles in our community, and working to transform our world and ourselves. Please join with me in our affirmation of covenant, saying,
Love is the doctrine of this church, the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other. This morning I'm going to tell you a story, a true story, about moving toward an unknown future. It's the story of my cross-country trip from Ohio to California to begin my first solo gig in ministry, an interim year at a small church in Sacramento 25 years ago this year. When I served as interim minister there and at later places, other places, I used this story as my first sermon of the year. You might want to listen to it holding in mind those many months you spent without a minister. Subsequently, after my last interim gig, the story gained a sequel, which I think is fitting for today. The sequel is about journeying on, having learned a few things about the world and ourselves on that initial foray into the unknown. So are you ready for an adventure? Because I'm about to take you on one. So there I was in the middle of Wyoming in the middle of the afternoon. I'd been driving in Wyoming all day. I had slept comfortably the night before in a motel just past the Nebraska state line, and I woke refreshed to a comfortably cool summer morning with a clear sky and the sunrise still unfolding. When I started out that morning on a 2-lane highway leading into the western hills, Wyoming welcomed me with an extraordinary natural display. To my left, a thunderstorm hovered in the distance, putting on a spectacular lightning show, and to my right, a rainbow. I started the day grateful for this beautiful morning, filled with confidence and expectation for the day's journey. To make this 5-day, nearly 2,500-mile trip more bearable, I had arranged my rest breaks as sightseeing stops. I planned it as a pilgrimage following the great western trails of the pioneers, the Mormon and Oregon trails. My first stop on the historic trails was in Council Bluffs, Iowa, across the Missouri River from Omaha. There, the Mormons have built a log tabernacle a replica of one built by their forebears during the Mormon exodus to Utah. In 1847, there were still more Mormons in and around Omaha than in Salt Lake City. So Brigham Young had to travel back to Council Bluffs, then called Canesville, to be confirmed as the church's second prophet. For the occasion, 200 men raised the log tabernacle in 2.5 weeks. It was called the biggest log cabin in the world. The replica was built just a few years before I visited, using the same techniques, but not as quickly, and with some additional steps taken to strengthen it and make it more durable. I admired how this monument conveyed a visceral feeling of connection to those pioneers who went before, helped bridge the gap between their time and ours, awakened a person's compassion for them. West of Omaha, the Mormon Trail parallels the Oregon Trail. The Oregon pioneers followed the south bank of the Platte River through Nebraska. The Mormons followed the north bank. Here in Wyoming, the trails mixed and merged, even if the pioneers chose not to. As I drove through Nebraska along I-80 and US 26, enjoying modern paved highways with services and good public radio reception the whole length of the state, I tried to imagine how those pioneers in their ox-drawn wagons experienced this strange new landscape, to them a wilderness of gradually more rolling hills and finally buttes rising curiously from the plain. Traveling from east to west, it is a landscape of increasing obstacles. I was driving a 14-foot U-Haul truck, towing my car behind me on a half-trailer. The truck was excellent. It had a perfectly healthy automatic transmission, handled smoothly, and had a working air conditioner and radio. The trailer, well, let's just say it was a new experience for me. By the time I got to Wyoming, I had had a 3-day intensive training course. The chief lessons: check the straps holding your car's front wheels to the trailer every time you stop. If they're loose, the trailer will fishtail. That bolt that holds the ramps off the ground needs to be tied down, or it will come loose and the ramps will drag on the pavement, sending sparks flying. And never, never pull into any place where you might have to back up in order to get out. I had distinct experiences for each of these lessons, but more importantly, there was someone there to help me in each case. There was a trucker who noticed and signaled to me that my trailer was fishtailing a bit before I could feel it. There was a couple on vacation who waved me over because they saw the sparks flying from the trailer ramps. I could hear them dragging, but when I got out to check, I couldn't see what the problem was, because when the truck wasn't moving, they lifted back up off the pavement. And there was another couple, kind couple, who helped me turn around in a parking lot that was just too small to make a circle in. I was impressed with my luck, and also with the generous kindness of these strangers, though I hasten to add it was not my intention to rely on the kindness of strangers. So the confidence and expectation I felt the morning of that fourth day was partly due to my good luck. Also, I felt I'd finally gotten the hang of the trailer, having had a whole day without any trouble from it. I'd had beautiful weather for driving, and I'd had some fun sightseeing, taking in such Oregon Trail landmarks as Fort Kearney, Chimney Rock, and Scotts Bluff. I also stopped at a Pony Express station. The Pony Express also followed the Platte through Nebraska. On this beautiful morning, with its spectacular show of lightning and rainbows. I was excited to see some of Wyoming, a state I had never visited. I expected to see interesting things. And by mid-afternoon I saw a place where wagon wheels had cut deep ruts into a rocky hillside. I saw a beautiful natural bridge hidden in a valley with red rock walls. And I saw and climbed that famed Oregon Trail landmark, Independence Rock. And now, here I was in the middle of Wyoming, in the middle of the afternoon, driving a 14-foot U-Haul truck, pulling my car behind me on a half trailer. I had one last scheduled sightseeing stop, the visitor center at the South Pass. I was looking forward to it. The South Pass was the key to the Western Trail systems 175 years ago. It was called the Cumberland Gap of the Far West. Heavy wagons pulled by teams could not get over the Continental Divide at any other place. The Oregon, California, Mormon, and Pony Express trails all used its long, gentle slope to cross the divide. The excellent and informative visitor centers at Chimney Rock, Scotts Bluff, and Independence Rock followed the stories of particular pioneer families, and I expected to learn more of their stories, like the next chapter of a novel at the South Pass. However, I never got to the South Pass Visitor Center because as I was happily and confidently tooling down State Route 28, I saw this sign for a scenic route to the South Pass. Now, had I not been feeling quite so confident, I might have snuck a look at my copy of the New Guide to Mormon History for Family Travel, which I kept on the seat right next to me the whole trip. It says, near the iron mine is a turnoff to Atlantic City, a very small settlement reached by several miles of rough dirt road. Just south of Atlantic City is the junction of two dirt roads. That is the area on the original Pioneer Trail where the handcart company was caught in an early winter storm and many of them perished. We recommend you go back from here. There is a dirt road from Atlantic City to the South Pass, but we do not recommend it. That would have stopped me. But no, I was feeling confident. I had had a marvelous day. I had gotten the hang of the trailer. I didn't need to read the guidebook, so I had no clue what I was in for. I made the left turn when I came to it and proceeded down a nicely level gravel road like many of the ones I'd encountered at other visitor centers along the way. It was not in the least bit alarming to me. But gradually, the gravel thinned, and before long, I was on a dirt road. I was on a dirt road that had just room for two cars to pass each other. And it had deep ditches on both sides, and it was getting narrower, and it was getting rougher. And I was driving a 14-foot U-Haul truck, pulling my car behind me on a half trailer at no more than 25 miles per hour, with no room to turn around and no skill to back up. Like it or not, I was committed. Soon I came to a National Park Service sign pointing down a dirt road to the left. It said something like Atlantic City Road. Straight ahead, it looked like I was entering someone's ranch. The road went through a fence over one of those rumble strips that cattle can't walk over. And on the other side of the rumble strip, I could see cattle close to the road with no barrier to keep them off of it. So I made the left turn. It seemed reasonable. And the road was reasonably level for the next 7 miles. I know it was 7 miles because along the way I saw another sign that said it was 7 miles back to State Route 28. and 24 miles ahead to US Route 287. Well, I told myself, if it's no worse than this for the next 24 miles, I can make it. I pressed on, not that I had any choice. I still had no way to turn around. The dirt road was still relatively level, but wound over gentle slopes and through fences as it went on. After a few more miles, I rounded a bend and saw, sitting beside the road out there in the middle of absolutely nowhere, one of those big yellow road graders that are used in highway construction. I thought to myself, this is either good news or bad news. It was bad news. Past that grader, the road was rough and slightly rutted, but forward was the only way I could go. Do you remember that thunder shower I mentioned? I have a notion that at least the edge of it had passed through the area where I was now driving. Some of the dips in my road were kind of muddy. As I went on, they got more so. I began to dread each one as I approached, fearing that out here in the middle of absolutely nowhere with no one about, I would get my heavy, fully loaded truck stuck in the mud or hang up the trailer somehow. I kept on going, sloshing through each valley with all my attention bent to the task. I was beginning to get tired. Several more miles down the road, another road met mine coming in from the right. It was even less of a road than the one I was on, just two dirt tracks with grass growing between. There to greet any traveler coming to the end of that little road was a great big National Park Service sign that said, "Original Oregon Trail Route, rough road ahead, 4x4 vehicle recommended." The road was level and dry there, so I just stopped for a moment to breathe. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Rough road ahead? What had I been driving on? My choice was between the rough road ahead and two tire tracks leading off to the right I knew not where. The Park Service sign restated that US 287 lay down the rough road ahead. So when I was ready, I pressed on. The road was actually no worse than before until the last couple of miles, where there were deep ruts, and it now took all my concentration to keep the truck out of them and all my prayers to hope the trailer didn't fall into them. Finally, after more than 30 miles and about an hour and a half of the scariest and most exhausting driving I've ever done, I emerged onto US 287. To a place I had been earlier that day. I now had to retrace about 50 miles of my trip down US 287 and across State Route 28 to get back to the place where I turned off to begin this little adventure. And did I mention that when I left State Route 28 in the first place, I had a little less than a quarter tank of gas in the truck? That was probably helpful. It lightened my load a bit. But it was 100 miles to the next gas station. The adventure was not over. For the last 20 minutes before I reached the gas station, I drove with the gas gauge needle in the red zone. When I went in to pay for my gas, I told the attendant my honest feelings. I have never been so glad to see a gas station in my whole life. She replied, "I hear that a lot." Well, I didn't make it to Salt Lake City that night as I'd hoped. I stopped at Evanston, Wyoming, just short of the Utah border. I think that motel room was the best one I stayed in the whole trip. The next day, I came the rest of the way through Utah and Nevada, over the Sierras, and on to Sacramento, my new home. It was a long, tiring, but less eventful drive. And when I got there, I had a little perspective on my feelings of excitement and anticipation about possibilities in this new place. Does any of that resonate with your experience of these recent months without ministers serving you? I gather you learned a lot during that time, as much about yourselves as about your church. Certainly, I learned a lot about myself on that 5-day trip. Let me also assure you that in my now 25-year career, I have learned even more since then. Are you ready for the sequel? Yes. A decade later, I took my vacation time to drive home to Houston from the UUA General Assembly in Salt Lake City, seeing sights on my way through western Colorado. I could not resist the opportunity to take a side trip up into Wyoming. From the town of Vernal, Utah, near Dinosaur National Monument, I drove north through Flaming Gorge and on up to that crossroads where I had been so grateful to find a gas station. This time I was driving a very comfortable rented van with satellite radio, towing nothing. Towing nothing. A right turn onto good old Route 28, and I was headed for the South Pass. And I found it. Right by the side of Route 28, no need for any dirt roads. It was not at all what I had been expecting and looking for 10 years before. There was no visitor center building. No exhibits tracing the stories of the pioneer families that were chronicled at Chimney Rock and Scotts Bluff and Independence Rock. There was no evident trail to see. There was just a small parking lot and a paved circle of walkway with 6 or 8 markers that told about the landscape and some general history of the South Pass and its importance. Across the road, I found an older marker indicating where one of several trails branched west from there. It was something to stand in the place, the blessedly gradual slope that had been so important for the pioneers to get on with their business. And it seems fitting that for the visitor today, as for them, there's not much reason to linger there. For me, it was good to actually get there, even all those years later, and know where I was. No doubt I had driven right past it unaware in my rush to the gas station. Had I found it 10 years before, I'd have been disappointed. It was not what I had pictured at the end of a short gravel road when I turned off to begin my unplanned adventure. But now, having driven up from Vernal with only the expectation that I'd find it, and with no need for it to be any particular thing, just open to whatever it would be when I found it, I was satisfied. I was more than satisfied because I'd put to rest the mystery of my last Wyoming trip. I drove back to Vernal at a leisurely pace, stopping at a few other such roadside markers and taking in some more of Flaming Gorge. I went on to discover the wonders of western Colorado with no need to wonder what I'd missed in Wyoming. A little experience can put things in perspective, especially if you revisit it, stop and walk around it again when you're free of urgent needs or hopeful expectations. Take it in for what it is and understand how you were moving through it before. It lets you have a second visceral connection to what went before. It helps bridge the gap between you then and you now. awakens your compassion for yourself and others involved in the experience. It lets you move on to new experiences, freed from any feeling that you missed out or did it wrong, and more able to encounter the new in a satisfying and meaningful way. You might not find what you expect or do what you planned or hoped, but you can be in a way that makes it all right. All of us here have experience to lend our expedition toward the unknown, hoped-for future of UUCLR. We envision becoming a more intergenerationally and racially diverse congregation, making an even greater difference for social justice in Central Arkansas. These are goals for the long haul, not for a desperate dash to fill up our tank. We have a good foundation to build on. We're equipped, we're friendly, and know how to invite and support newcomers into active participation in our church community and ministries if we stay committed to being good neighbors, showing up for justice, making new friends beyond our accustomed circles, and partnering with them to manifest more love and justice in the wider community. Then new folks will find a spiritual home with us, and we will welcome them. All that we aspire to is achievable if we work together, patiently and steadily, with open and loving hearts. What's best in life is found in relationship. Look well to what is best in you. Look well to what is best in each other. And let those blessings bless the world. Amen.
David, our chalice lighter, if you'd come forward, please. And as David distinguishes the chalice, if everyone could please join us in our closing words, which are in your order of service, saying, go out into the world in peace, have courage, hold on to what is good, return to no person evil for evil, strengthen the faint-hearted, support the weak, help the suffering, honor all beings.
And may our decisions for today be for a blessing.